The world was stunned when Russia launched an old-school ground invasion of Ukraine. But how about the great cyber war that we've been warned of? Yes, Ukrainian institutions and companies have been hacked, but none of the major attacks taking out power grids and telecom networks, at least not yet. With Russian military using Ukrainian mobile networks on the battlefield, some wonder if the West maybe overestimated Moscow's tech savviness. Wait for it, warns the U.S. president. Joe Biden telling business leaders that they better shore up their defenses. Most vulnerable corporations, and in particular, the international banking system. Could cyberspace be where World War III starts? Or did it start virtually a long time ago? George Orwell would have plenty to say on all the disinformation campaigns that have swept the globe in the past 2 decades. Even today, Vladimir Putin's invasion of a sovereign state is craftily sold at home as a special military operation, and he's already honing his message abroad, working inward, you might say, from the fringes of social media. How battle-ready is the West on this one? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at disinformation and the threat of cyber warfare. With us, he's a former French diplomat who worked as a top aerospace executive. Jean-Louis Gergorin is author of Cyber, the Permanent War. Thank you for being with us.
You're most welcome.
From Washington, Tatiana Bolton, Policy Director for Cybersecurity and Emerging Threats at the R Street Institute think tank. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And from Tel Aviv, he's one of the founders of the cyber branch of the Israeli security agency Shabak, Harel Menashri, head of cyber at the Holon Institute of Technology. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, on the same day, the U.S. president warned of chemical attacks being a major possibility in Ukraine. He also warned of cyber attacks targeting the globe and U.S. companies. Claire Rush has the story.
The White House is describing it as a call to action and a call to responsibility for American businesses. Citing evolving intelligence, U.S. President Joe Biden is urging his country's companies to harden their digital defenses against potential Russian cyber attacks.
The magnitude of Russia's cyber capacity is fairly consequential, and it's coming. The federal government is doing its part to get ready, but under U.S. law, as you all remember, the private sector, all of you, largely decides the protections that you will or will not take.
Biden said cyber attacks are part of Russia's playbook, and Washington is concerned that critical infrastructure in the U.S. may be at risk. While White House cybersecurity advisors say there's no evidence of a specific attack, they have seen an increase in what could be preliminary hacking activity, such as scanning websites for vulnerabilities. And they're warning companies to be on the lookout.
There is some preparatory activity that we're seeing, and that is what we shared in a classified context with companies who we thought might be affected. Lock your digital doors, make it harder for attackers, make them do more work.
U.S. businesses have been advised to take steps such as backing up their data and enabling multi-factor authentication.
Tatiana Bolton, we kind of weren't sure whether to believe Joe Biden when he said that an invasion of Ukraine was imminent. He was right. When he says that a cyber attack is coming, what are your thoughts?
I think it's extremely likely that a significant cyber attack can absolutely be perpetrated either against the United States or any EU nation, Israel or the UK, because we are the ones fighting against Russia in its aggressive war against Ukraine, and we very well might be in the crossfire.
What are the tangible signs that you're seeing?
I think obviously the scanning of networks is a very concerning sign. We also know from years past that Russia has been sitting on energy networks, and we've found evidence of that. That's been reported on over the course of the last few years. Putin has also actively threatened our financial services sector. So I think that given how caught in a corner he is right now in terms of the kinetic war that he is perpetrating on Ukraine, I think it's very likely that something may happen on the cyber front.
Something may happen on the cyber front, you say. The Kremlin has reacted to Biden's remarks through its presidential spokesperson.
The Russian Federation, unlike many Western countries, including the United States, does not engage in state-level banditry.
Tatiana, what does he mean, Dmitry Peskov, when he says that the United States takes part in banditry?
I think that this is just typical Russian propaganda. Just like they're arguing that they're not committing atrocities and war crimes in Ukraine, similarly, they're arguing that they don't commit, they don't do cyber attacks and they don't do banditry. That's a term not often used in cyber, and I wouldn't argue that the United States does that or perpetrates that against any other country.
Hanel Menashri, what are you reading sitting in Israel, a country, let's remind our viewers, which is trying to keep good relations with both sides in this one?
Yes, we try to be in good relations with both sides, but yet we know that the Russians are very, very good in cyber. And we know their strength and their power. And we, in Israel, I can say that we try to defend our critical infrastructure for many years. In fact, Israel was the first country in the world that see all the defense of critical infrastructures from holistic point of view, because we know that each critical infrastructure depend and hang and connect to other infrastructure, so you can't protect and defend only one, but you have to see all of them together. And because we know the strength and the power of the Russians and some other very powerful player in this world, we try to defend ourselves. I can say that in this war in Ukraine, we saw some attacks, Russian attacks on implements that belong to Ukraine, but unlike what happened December 2015, the Russian didn't succeed to shut down grids, because Ukraine have support from some U.S. companies and European Union teams that help them.
So Hanel, what you're saying is
to shut down.
What you're saying is that the Russians at the outset of the war last month tried to shut down the grids, tried to launch a full-scale cyber attack on Ukraine, but failed?
We didn't saw Ukraine facilities for such as electricity and so that fell down. We saw communication, finance, and some government facilities that shut down by the Russians. In fact, a day before the attack, there were two major strikes, two major attacks against Ukraine that shut down facilities, government facilities and finance. And a week before the attack, there were very, very big Russian attack against Ukraine governmental offices. I think maybe the Russian plan to attack a week before, but because maybe the winter game in China or some other reason, they delay the attack. But a day before the attack, there were two attacks against governmental offices and finance facilities in Ukraine, successful. We didn't saw critical infrastructure such as electricity that shut down, and I think that the Ukrainian prepare themselves very good against such things. But yet the Russian shut down communication, and in some place in the first 2 days of the war, it's hit back the Russian troops because they some of encrypted secure systems that the Russian used to use. They cannot use it because it needed Ukraine communication that they shut themselves.
Yeah, it needed Ukraine's.
Down,
it needed
the Russian used to.
It needed. You're saying Ukraine's telephone network.
The Russian need. So the Russian need to use open communication, and that's how the intelligence that belong to Ukraine, and maybe they have support from United States or Great Britain, helps them to kill two Russian generals.
So, Jean-Louis Gergorin, which is it? Is it that the Russians tried but failed to target things like the power grid, or that they didn't want to target it?
No, I think I agree with the previous speaker. They tried and failed. Like they tried and failed to win quickly in the conventional war, you know. And obviously they were convinced at the beginning they could win in a few days. You know. And they totally underestimated the Ukrainians. They underestimated the Ukrainians were not the same in terms of preparedness that they were in 2015, you know. They have been helped. They made a huge effort, and their cybersecurity capabilities and the level of support they receive, especially from the US and from some European countries, has been very significant. And in my view, they tried and failed. They tried. What is the most important for?
Are you surprised at this? Are you surprised that they tried and failed? Because we've have this reputation in France that the Russians are great at hacking and that they're the best.
They are. They are among the best, and in fact, they are extremely good hacking using cyber as cyber warfare in peacetime. You know, and this is the basis of their strategic doctrine, which has been stated by General Gerasimov, their chief of staff, in a famous article in February of 2013. He said that what is the most important thing in a war now is what happens before the opening of hostilities, something that the French chief of staff, General Burkhardt, said far more recently. And in this preliminary phase, without hostilities, he said the confrontation in the information space is essential, offers wide asymmetric opportunities, fairly important. The word asymmetric is central in Russian strategic thinking.
So they succeeded in the build-up, but now that the actual fighting has started, what went wrong?
What went wrong is, first, I said, they succeeded not in the build-up, they succeeded in various attacks in peacetime, things about the ransomware. Now we understand, because there have been some leaks from some Russian-speaking groups, that in fact the ransomware gangs based in Russia, which basically represent 2/3 of the benefits of this criminal activity worldwide, these groups are not criminal works. They are not pirates. They are privateers, corsairs. You know, it means they make that for money, but with some kind of approval from license from security services.
And with Russia under sanctions, we can expect the government to rely more on these corsairs, as you put them?
Probably, you know. In fact, some of these corsairs, like one of the most famous one, which is based in St. Petersburg, Conti, which is the name of their malware, you know, has issued a statement saying they fully support the Russian people, the Russian government, Russia against aggression. This is a traditional Russian view of the situation, you know. But for example, they just made a mistake. They forgot that some of their affiliates, some people were part of the gangs, or were Russians, they were Ukrainians. And so there was a dissenter.
And by the way, that's a problem for IT companies worldwide, because we have corporations where you have both Russian and Ukrainian staff who are still working together on projects, obviously at a distance. So That's a difficult one, isn't
It's
it?
a difficult. I heard about it. I know about it from various tech companies or aerospace companies, including Boeing. I know that Boeing, compared to Airbus, had far more development engineers in Russia. And and there are many also developers in Ukraine, which are now in a war-torn country. So the Russians are extremely good to use cyber in peacetime, and under a false flag, and pretending that this is a criminal activity. And I think it has changed. We have to really give credit on one thing to the Biden administration. They ended the hypocrisy of the Western nations pretending that these ransomware groups that were making more and more millions. We all know the whole story in France, the various hospital centers, hospital CHU, in France that have been
Teaching
attacked.
hospitals in France were
Yes.
held for ransom by these cyber criminals.
Yes, but in fact, in a number of cases, these people are smart, extremely smart. They know very well that in the French National Health Service, never a hospital will pay a ransom in Bitcoin into an offshore site. It's ridiculous. I guess the goal of all these attacks, including a 2-month attacks that paralyzed the Irish Health Service last year, from May to end of July, with enormous consequences. No more 2 months late for the registration of births. This was not, they did not want a ransom. In fact, they said, we are very generous. We don't ask for a ransom. So why they did it? They did it to demonstrate to the Europeans that they could inflict damages and to intimidate us ahead of open aggression like the one that we have seen.
Jean-Louis Gergoin, you pay tribute to Joe Biden for blowing the whistle on the fact that the Russian government is complicit with these groups.
He did not say complicit. He said they are responsible. They cannot ignore. He was and he met Putin, and he had even an agreement with Putin in Geneva on June 16 of last year, stating that all the key infrastructures in both countries were off limits. And that the U.S. will retaliate.
It was up to Putin to police, in any case, those
Yes.
groups, is what he was saying. After the start of the war with Ukraine last month, Microsoft went public with tipping off Kyiv. They also tipped off the Pentagon and European powers on cyber security issues. The president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, published a blog statement in which he said, we're a company, not a government or a country. In times like this, it's especially important for us to work in consultation with those in government. Tatiana Bolton, it's kind of like during World War II, you had the big car companies in the U.S., which suddenly switched to making planes and tanks. Is now in the 21st century, it's Silicon Valley giants that are enrolled in the war effort?
Well, I very much applaud all of the work that Microsoft and others have done in terms of trying to push back against Russia and all of its aggression, and joining with the Europe and the United States to push back against Russia. I think because so much of our critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector, and because so much of the tech talent is within those large tech companies, it's imperative upon them to join the fight when we are trying to battle back against a world power that's invading another country. And because parts of the fight now are not just on the battleground, but because the battleground is now went digital, it makes sense that they would use their tools and their services and their people to fight back against it, because in the end, they are as much affected as anybody else.
And when you heard that, and it was mentioned there by Hanel Menashri, that you had these Russian generals killed because they were speaking basically on the Ukrainian cell phone network instead of on secure lines, are you thinking to yourself, maybe the Russians aren't as good as everybody thinks?
I think that what sometimes gets lost in all these conversations. Oh, sorry.
Go
What
ahead,
gets
Tatiana.
lost Yeah, what gets lost in these conversations is that there are battles going on behind the scenes that we don't see between Russian cyber forces from the FSB and other groups, as well as the US, the EU, the UK, with cyber mission forces that are on the ground in Ukraine and here back in the United States. And they're fighting it out on the digital domain. We just don't see it. And so what happens is absolutely things like that, where telecommunications networks get knocked out and it causes second and third order effects. I think that it's not necessarily because Russia's not good at cyber operations, but because in the fog of war, a lot happens and you can't always predict what a particular offensive operation, like trying to knock out Ukrainian telecommunication systems, will eventually accomplish.
Are you surprised that Russia hasn't been more aggressive when it comes to cyber since the start of the war?
I was at first a little bit surprised, but honestly, if you think about the way in which the battle could escalate from a limited operation and between two countries into a full-scale third world war, if, for example, Putin were to attack the United States very directly or the EU very directly through a major cyber attack that inflicted catastrophic damage, I think you understand why they're being hesitant. I think that one of the biggest things right now that Putin's trying to do, both through his actions and through some of the messages that he's sending, is to try and make sure the United States and Europe don't get involved further in Ukraine. It's in his best interest. It's in Putin's best interest to keep us out of the war in a more serious way. And the only thing that a major cyber attack against the US or Europe would accomplish would be to bring us in full force.
Jean-Louis Gergoin, you agree that it's not in Russia's interest to draw in the West, for instance, with an attack on the banking system, which has been deemed by some analysts as vulnerable?
I am a little less optimistic than Mrs. Bolton. You know, I think that there is a mid-level option, which is neither to remain at low level of cyber activity against the West or to go full speed. And I believe more in selective attack against some assets, perhaps some banks, some weak points of the economic and financial system, in order to demonstrate their nuisance capability.
Just to be clear for our viewers, if Russia wanted to, could they take out SWIFT? You know, the private entity that enables all the banking transactions?
No, I think that, I hope so, and it's very likely, but precisely because everybody thinks of SWIFT, everybody thinks of the Fed, everybody thinks of the New York Stock Exchange, everybody thinks of Euronext, everybody thinks of that, they are very well protected. No, but you may have some major regional bank that is less protected, you know, and so they would like to demonstrate their ability to put nuisance. Exactly, you know, when they launch a major attack paralyzing an entire health system, you know, without any profit objective against the Irish health system, they attacked the Irish. They did not attack the French or the Brits, you know. They attacked the Irish to demonstrate their nuisance capability. Right. They may try to do that again.
Back in 2020, the United States revealed the SolarWinds cyber attack, targeting thousands of companies globally, including top echelons of the U.S. government, as well as NATO, the European Parliament. President Trump at the time downplayed its severity. And it's only after his successor, Joe Biden, took office that 10 Russian diplomats were expelled and sanctions were leveled.
This highly sophisticated operation, attributed to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, involved the compromise of trusted software updates to inject malicious code into thousands of victim organizations.
Hanel Menashri, SolarWinds captured the world's imagination. Of course, it was a cyber attack that took a long time to prepare and plan. Do you think that the Kremlin in its drawers has plans for a similar kind of attack, or is it something they can organize fast?
Yes, no, not so fast, but you know, it's if you have the opportunity, you attack and you try to attack. This attack in SolarWinds, as we know, began at 2017 at last, and it shown to the world because of, I believe, mistake of one of the SVR employees that work on it, one of the attackers, because they try to take too much data at a time, and that's why in Fire company they discover what happened and the investigation began. But when we see what happened there, the Russian SVR could breach and you can say tell all the offices in the United States government, include defense, include the NSA, include nuclear facilities, cyber facilities, and for example, one of the major networks that shut down by the government itself was CyberNet. CyberNet is operational network that belong to the NSA and the Cyber Command, and as Snowden showed us, they also send malwares, operational malwares from the NSA and Cyber Command to other units to use. And if the Russians could and succeed to reach to this network, it's thing that they breach very deeply, and we know from the presidential orders that the United States have operation and targets bank against every operation system that the United States Army or military may in the future be involved in a battle against.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you on this. I was going to ask you on this point.
It's a problem.
Yes. When it comes to hacking and cyber attacks, does a good offense always beat a good defense, or has the United States and the West learned the lessons of SolarWinds and they'll know what to do next time?
Look, first of all, there is never be 100% of protection, never be. And in the cyber field, all the time, the attacker has advantage on the defender. But I can say also that maybe SolarWinds made by the SVR, and in the Ukraine war, we see most of the attacks made by the GRU maybe, and I don't know if they are connected together and move and transfer intelligence from one unit to other unit. I don't know if they are. And maybe, I believe that in Ukraine, the intelligence, the Western intelligence is very, very good. We see it all the time. And they have enough data and enough information to prepare the Ukraine facilities against the Russians. But if we're talking about what happened in the United States, we have seen that the Russian in SolarWinds breach to all the governmental systems, and I don't know if they still have some silent places that the American defenders didn't see. I believe they clear everything, but I don't know. But when the president warning to all the American companies, he know what he's talking about, because you know most of the attacks in Israel, for example, in the last 2 years that succeed to the attacker succeed because the defenders didn't done what they have to done, and most of those attacks have or breach through known holes, known breaking, known
breaches.
backdoors that already have known breaches. Yes, and the defenders didn't done what they have to done.
But let me ask you on this,
Defenders do
Hanel
what they need to
Menashri.
do most of the time.
Let me ask you about this, Hanel Menashri, because we were saying how the Russians are really good at hacking. Israelis as well have a reputation of being very good at hacking. We remember what happened at the Natanz nuclear plant in Iran. And I want to ask you, right now you have the prime minister who went to Moscow to try to play a mediator role. You've had the Ukrainian president launching an appeal over the weekend to the Knesset, to the Israelis, to side with him. There are Israelis of both Russian and Ukrainian origin. Right now, is there mixed loyalties when it comes to the hacking community inside of Israel?
What, please repeat your question.
Are there mixed loyalties? Israel is trying to stay out of it, but are there mixed loyalties within the IT and the hacking community inside of Israel?
Look, Israel is not involved in this war and doesn't want to be involved. And remember that Ukraine are our friends, and also the Russian, we want them to be our friends. And we have enough problems in our north, in Syria. We don't want to make the Russian do something against us. So I don't believe that Israel tried to do something against one of these sides. And we just want to know what to be prepared in our facilities and in our side.
Yeah, but your companies do a lot of business with Silicon Valley. So at one point, if it does escalate, do you get drawn in?
Right. So we try to be prepared.
Jean-Louis,
we try to strengthen our bundle and to be better all the time. I hope we succeed.
Jean-Louis Gergorin?
Yes, I just want to point out a major challenge that has been alluded to or mentioned by Mr. Menashri is the positioning, the pre-positioning of malwares, sleeping malware, not activated but activable malwares in key infrastructures. And starting in end of 2017 and beginning of 2018, hundreds, if not thousands, of such pre-positioned malware, so-called implants, have been found in US key infrastructures, in French key infrastructures, in British key infrastructures, in German key infrastructures.
So these can be activated at any time?
They could be activated. They don't need to be new scanning, etc. And so they have capabilities, but obviously should they push the button on major infrastructures like power grid, it will be a major aggression. For the US has been very clear. Biden has been very clear. The General Nakasone, and it started even under the Trump administration, that any attack coming from Russia, pseudo-criminal or state, there will be cyber retaliation. The doctrine in Europe is far more obscure. There is, in Germany, there has long been a kind of view that resilience is enough. We just look for resilience. But as it has been pointed, the aggressor has always the advantage in cyber. So we need a cyber deterrence in Europe. And there are two options. Either there is a cyber umbrella from the US, but this does not appear in Biden's statement, who said, I protect US key infrastructures, or the Europeans organize their own cyber deterrence. It's a major challenge. It was not in the initial French presidency platform. It is changing now. Because
I was going to ask you, because you earlier this year penned an op-ed piece in the French newspaper Le Monde calling for for Europe to have a better cyber preparedness. When you hear the statements in the preparation for this Thursday's EU summit, you get the feeling the message is heard.
I get a feeling, that the atmosphere is changing, and that this idea that resilience is enough, resilience is enough, is now being replaced with the idea that we need to organize our defense and to be able to retaliate, but it will be complicated.
And where does that happen? Does it happen at the level of NATO, or does that happen at the level of the European Union?
The problem,
how?
In NATO, you can retaliate only if NATO formally recognizes that there is an open aggression triggering Article 5, which is a complicated phenomenon. And if these attacks don't kill anybody, are below the threshold of open warfare, NATO cannot be
so the EU is the better place to go?
EU is more informal, and I don't believe, really, there will not be a EU retaliation force, I believe in coalitions of the willing, to use a famous American expression, badly used, It means that there are some countries in Europe that have the technical capability and to have appropriate intelligence, even more if the Americans provide intelligence, and the ability to retaliate. This is the case of France. This is the case, obviously, of UK, very strong capabilities. This is the case of the Netherlands. This is the case of some Baltic states. This could be the case of Germany, but there is a question of political will to retaliate in this kind of
and perhaps that's changing now. Let's go to Kiev. Last week, Belgian television sat down with young activists who were both posting to TikTok and hard at work trying to take down Russian websites and their proxies.
Firstly, you ban TV channels. Then you block channels on YouTube. Then you try to attack Russian sites. And it's step by step, you will want this war against Russian fakes.
Tatiana Bolton, what can a teenaged cyber army do?
Well, I wouldn't count the teenagers out. I think we've seen that it's not age necessarily that determines your abilities in cybersecurity or hacking, but how dedicated you are and whether you have those abilities. I think that what's most important is for us to remember that it can be very dangerous to go outside of the formal government structures and the organized sort of cyber capabilities of the sort of warring parties during the middle of a conflict, because it can absolutely cause more damage. I think that obviously there are people in Ukraine that just want to do something, right? They can't go. They may not be able to go fight. They may be with their families. They may be disabled, but they feel like they can use their brains to help. And so I fully understand their goals, and I'm compassionate towards those. I think that they can do a lot. It depends on what their aims are.
Depends on what their aims are. For those who are posting to social media, well, right now you have an information blackout inside of Russia because of the draconian rules. Many of the social media giants, including TikTok, have left Tatiana Bolton. When the war began on February the 24th, just as the Arab Spring was said to be the Facebook revolution at the time, this was supposed to be the first TikTok war. But it hasn't really panned out that way, has it, if Russians aren't watching those TikToks?
Well, I think it's completely unsurprising that a dictator like Putin, just like Xi Jinping in China, blocks information coming to their citizens because they're afraid of the truth getting to their citizens. And so I think that we should have expected Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, everything to be blocked. I think to the extent that we can get more information into Russia will be very useful in trying to turn the tide of this war. Right now on the ground, Russia is stalled. And so with some efforts to try and get more information to the Russian people, to try and turn the tide there as well in terms of public opinion. I think that is how we can possibly end this.
Yeah, but isn't the West at a disadvantage when it comes to, if the quote, information war? Tatiana, we see how the Western sites are either blocked or have had to pull out from Russia. Going the other way, RT, for instance, is banned on YouTube. Yet I was speaking to people the other day who are not journalists, who are normal people, and they were saying to me how that some of them who get a lot of their information from YouTube were parroting Moscow's line. It seems as though their version of events has an easier time coming our way than the other way around.
Well, I think this is often the case with disinformation. When things are sensational, or when it's a lie or something, the Russians, I think, desperately want to believe that Russia didn't go and invade another country just for the sole purpose of taking it over. I think the Russians, the people there, not the people in power, but just average Russian citizens, don't want to believe that their country is committing atrocities, right? So it's a lot easier for that kind of message to get through. There's been research to suggest that if we can, however, get to even 25% of the population with the truth, that will stem the tide and it will change the course of history.
So how do you serve up the truth, and what medium do you use? What's the most effective way to reach the greatest number of Russian people today?
Well, that is a very tough question. I think that's one that we don't have an answer to right now, given that all media channels and all information is currently controlled by the Russian government. I think, perhaps that's what the teenage hackers are trying to get at, right? Is to try and get at those mediums that the U.S. government can't possibly touch and try to get some of that information across. You even see Arnold Schwarzenegger creating videos, posting them online all over various channels, trying to get to average Russian citizens to change their minds about what's happening and to give them, actual data and facts.
And you're Russian-born or Russian origin, Tatiana. Are you seeing chatter on social media? Are ordinary people engaging, or it's everybody's in their bubble?
There has been, so I was born in Russia and fled with my family when I was 7. As soon as the wall fell. So I know, firsthand the way in which the Soviet Union and the way the Russian government controls the citizens and information. And so I think that right now what's happening is that Russian citizens who are fairly crafty are trying to get around some of the controls that are being put in place on them by the government through using VPN and other means of getting to the internet without Russian control and banning. But even those people who are able to connect to Facebook, and I've seen some of this personally, don't believe the information that we're giving them in terms of the images of what's happening in Mariupol or the bombing of the maternity hospital or any of that. They're still very much, brainwashed from all the propaganda that's been going on. And you have to remember, it's not just now. It's not 2022 in Ukraine. It's been the same for the last 15 years, right? Putin, as long as Putin and his cronies have been in power, is how long the Russian people have been under this sort of blanket of propaganda. And it's really a really effective, unfortunately, very effective tool.
We'll have to leave it there for now, but Tatiana Bolton, I want to thank you so much for joining us from Washington. I want to thank Hanel Menashri for being with us from Tel Aviv. Jean-Louis Gergorin, thank you. Our coverage of Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues on France 24 and France24.com.